All right, so you look on the right there, right? That's the Nuremberg parade ground. So I hope you can see this a little bit. The left there, that's all people, right? So the Nazis built this parade ground in Nuremberg that was like the biggest parade ground ever built on the planet. And they'd have hundreds of thousands of people at these rallies, right? And so you look at the order. There's a line down the middle there where the leaders walk, and that's at Nuremberg. And then it's just surrounded by these masses and masses and masses of people in lines and all these orderly displays of power. And then there's Hitler there like this. And one of the things Hitler was really proud of was the fact that he could stand like that for like 8 hours. And that was willpower, as far as he was concerned. And he was a worshiper of willpower. And he bathed 4 times a day. So he's also somebody who was very much obsessed with cleanliness. Cleanliness and willpower and order. So that's Hitler. Well, if you're wondering about orderliness, I mean, take a look at that, man. So that's Nuremberg, right? That was the biggest rally grounds ever made in human history, Nuremberg. And Hitler was unbelievably good at spectacle. Look at how absolutely perfectly ordered that is. God only knows how many people there. Several 100,000, because they could all fit on the parade ground at the same time. All in absolutely perfect formation. Orderliness. Gone out of control. It's interesting because people think about Nazism as a descent into barbarity, right? But what it looks like is a disease of civilization. That's a whole different thing, because conscientiousness predicts success in complex industrial societies. And this is actually conscientiousness gone out of control on the orderly end of things. And Hitler was very good at listening to the German population, and what they were demanding in a period of chaos was order. And so that was exactly what he decided to provide. Spectacles of order. At Nuremberg, which was the prime place where the Nazis staged their celebrations, was the biggest gathering field ever made in human history. People arranged themselves, hundreds of thousands of people, into perfect squares. Everything, and you remember the jackboot Goose Step March and Hail Hitler. It's like it's all done in absolutely perfect sequence. You think about the Nazis and their goose stepping, and what's happening is that every single person in the military becomes an identical unit, right? They're all uniform, and they're all, in some sense, imitating the dictator in an absolutely perfect way. And there's the Nazis' use of light at night. They were unbelievably good at their this is one of the things that made fascism so difficult to fight, because with communism, because it was a fully articulated philosophy, you could attack it rationally. But fascism never really did that. What they did instead was use ritual, right? Huge mass rallies and highly emotionally supercharged meetings, and then the use of light and fire. And so Hitler built the biggest parade grounds in human history to host the Nuremberg rallies. And he would get in front of them on this huge stage with Greek columns, very impressive looking, and have blocks of thousands of people organized perfectly, orderly. The Germans are good at order, and order is associated with disgust sensitivity. Incredibly organized, orderly displays, complete, and then at night with fire. And behind him he would have all of the searchlights from the Luftwaffe lined up, dozens of them, shooting their lights straight up miles into the sky. So we stand in front of these incredibly impressive displays of light long before there were rock shows and so forth doing that. You know, it was unparalleled in history, and address the crowd. And he was very good at addressing the crowd. He'd say something, and if people were listening, he'd say more of it. And if they were listening, he'd say more of it. And because he was addressing the mob got exactly from Hitler what they wanted. And we saw what that was like, right? 120 million people dead in no time flat. And the worst horrors that were ever perpetrated on people, maybe. Because there's no shortage of perpetrated horrors. Stalin. Now look at that. That's something. That's Nuremberg again. So this is called the Cathedral of Lights. And so that's the parade ground there at the bottom that I just showed you that was full of people. So you get some idea of how big that is. Now all those lights around that, which they called the Cathedral of Lights, was the Luftwaffe gave the Nazis all their anti-aircraft lights. And then they arrayed them around the parade ground, so the whole thing was enclosed by this perfectly orderly cathedral of lights. And that was part of the spectacle that went along with the Nazi Party rallies at Nuremberg. That's Nuremberg at night. So what Hitler did, because he was very good at using fire and light as display as well. So that curtain there, so you see there's the Nuremberg buildings that we saw in the last photograph. Those are the searchlights from the Nazi Air Force. So they had them arrayed all the way around the grounds there and pointed straight up so that the nighttime rallies were illuminated by a cube of light. Very effective display, artistic display of orderliness. Oh, there's an example of Nazi order as well. So that's at Nuremberg, and I need to explain this picture to you. So the Nuremberg field was massive, as I said. You see those curtains? Those are lights. And the lights are the searchlights from the Luftwaffe, which was the Nazi Air Force. And Hitler would put those up behind him when he was speaking, and so then he'd have a curtain of lights behind him that stretched up so high into the sky that you couldn't see the top of them. And everybody was organized out there on the marching field. See, there's a good example there. Look at those people on the left, top left. They're organized in multiple dimensions simultaneously. And then on the right, you see a Nuremberg parade ground. And there's hundreds of thousands of people there, and they're all in absolutely perfect corridors. And then, so, you look at the top left one there. Those are soldiers. I can't remember. At the Nuremberg rallies, they had all sorts of people there. They had like the shovel brigade, and they were all standing there with their shovels ready to, shovel for Germany. And athletes and all sorts of people arrayed so that, there's this massive display of order and power. And so you look at the top left-hand corner, you see how those people are lined up. It's absolutely perfect. And then you see the same thing on the right here, eh? So look at the organization of that. Everything's square and perfect, and everybody's in line, and they're all in uniforms, and they're all going like this the same way. And then when they march, the soldiers, they're in perfect lines, in perfect squares, and they're all going like this. It's absolutely rigid, orderly perfection. And so the Germans tend to be conscientious, which is part of the reason why they have excellent engineers and part of the reason why their economy is so damn powerful. But one of the downsides of conscientiousness is orderliness, right? And so, people think the Nazis were uncivilized, but the new evidence seems to suggest that they weren't uncivilized at all. They were really, really, really civilized. And that if you get too civilized, too orderly, too conscientious, then things go to hell in a handbasket very, very rapidly. So there are some more examples of order, right? Look at that. Everything geometric, everything regular. The border's completely well defined. Everything here is squares. Everyone's lined up perfectly. Everything is uniform, right? Look there's pathways between the rows of people. This is again at Nuremberg. Perfect order.